Don't forget. Some things mustn't be forgotten. The shadow hunting me. I must hurry. My name is Daniel. I live in London at Mayfair. What have I done? This is crazy. Don't forget. Don't forget. I must stop him. Focus. My name is... Yes. I am Daniel.
Hi, my name is Thomas Grip, and I'm one of the co-founders of Frictional Games. I worked with engine code, gameplay code, design, and many other things for Amnesia. In my commentaries, I will mainly focus on the design behind the different parts of the game. I hope you'll enjoy them. name of this level is Rainy Hall, and it's supposed to be a combination of atmosphere setter and tutorial for the player. We wanted the player to start the game in a slow way so they could settle in and get used to how the game works. Amnesia is not a game with constant action happening all the time, and we wanted to have a constrained map where the player gets used to this. The only thing you need to do is to follow the track and get to the end of the level. Also, following tracks is something that becomes very useful in later levels, so we try to teach players this from the start. This is one of the first levels that we created for the game, and it was initially part of the archives level, which we will reach in a bit. Amnesia started out with a pretty different design, and when we redesigned it, the maps did not fit. This caused us to split them up and scatter them out. So in the first design, after this corridor, the archives level was supposed to follow, and the room lying there now was built much later. In fact, the first designs did not have Daniel waking up with an amnesia at all, and it was actually added later on. In the first story draft, Daniel still had hidden memories, but he was unaware of this at the start of the story. However, as we redesigned things, we found the waking up with amnesia thingy, although a bit cliché, much more fitting.
Hi there, my name is Luis Rodero. I'm mostly the tool programmer, level scripter at times, and perhaps the main reason why the rest of the core team at Fictional Games is pretty much forced to speak English at our internal meeting, as I am the only non-Swede here. Now, what a Spaniard is doing with a bunch of Swedish guys is a whole different story we won't be discussing today. By the way, I will be talking mostly about tools and scripting. Hope you like it. The editors themselves went through a lot of design changes during the development. Not that many in visual appeal as in internal stuff, like data structures and handling. This happened mostly because at the beginning we only knew the basic stuff that needed to be in them, and as they grew in features and functionality, they started to kind of fall apart, mostly due to my big lack of previous experience in projects like this. Right now, aloud, what the hell still sounds in my head when I look at some parts of the code, but I'm still proud of them. They can also get a bit buggy at times, but hopefully this won't happen again in the future, and I already got some nice ideas for the next iteration of the tools.
19th of August, 1839. I wish I could ask how much you remember. I don't know if there will be anything left after I consume this drink. Don't be afraid, Daniel. I can't tell you why, but know this. I choose to forget. Try to find comfort and strength in that fact. There is a purpose. You are my final effort to put things right. God willing, the name Alexander of Brandenburg still invokes bitter anger in you. If not, this will sound horrible. Go to the inner sanctum, find Alexander, and kill him. His body is old and weak, and yours, young and strong. He will be no match for you. One last thing. A shadow is following you. It's a living nightmare, breaking down reality. I have tried everything, and there is no way to fight back. You need to escape it as long as you can. Redeem us both, Daniel. Descend into the darkness where Alexander waits and murder him. Your former self, Daniel.
Hello everyone, my name is Mikael, and I'm the writer for Amnesia, The Dark Descent. I think we can all feel the story kick-starting as we finish the letter from Daniel. The game itself is just filled with confusion, and I think we're really doing the player a service keeping it simple in the beginning. Basically try to take your revenge on Alexander, that is the premise of the game. You don't really need to dive any deeper than that, but hoping that the player will care about the story, they have the entire game in front of them to decide if they think killing Alexander is justified or not.
Alexander, is it inside the castle?
In a manner of speaking. Come, bring the lamp. You've been to the refinery, have you not?
I don't believe I have. Is it connected to the... what did you call it?
The inner sanctum. My most precious chamber, Daniel. And it lies well beyond the refinery. In fact, it lies beneath the very stone of Brandenburg.
This is one of the many hub levels in the game, and this is a design concept that we started out with in Penumbra. The idea is to give the player some freedom on where to go, but at the same time give a clear objective. In this level, the slime obstacle is a thing that the player needs to get past, and all other levels then have things needed to do so. The slime itself is one of the few puzzles left from the initial designs, and the one I'm probably the least proud of. Now that slime appears all around, it feels a bit forced that you need to have a potion on the slime. Many testers also complained that they wanted other options in getting rid of the slime, like burning it. However, creating a potion is the central theme for this hub, so we had to let it be. I don't think it's that bad, but we probably could have redesigned it if we had time.
If you haven't followed our development blog back when it started, you might have missed one of the biggest changes in our production pipeline. 2 years back, we started a toolset side project to ease and speed up the creation of content for the game. I'd say the level editor, which is what we, or more specifically James, Mark and Marcus, have used to build all the halls and corridors you are working through right now, is the big start of the pack. Its workings in a nutshell: while all the models and assets are actually made in software like Maya or Blender, everything geometry-wise in the levels is put together in it. Then lighting and sweet details like decals and fog are added in. While this approach might sound simple, really nice stuff can come out from it, as you can see in the game. Scattered throughout the game, you can see some signs written in Latin. The reason for using it is that it was considered a language of culture and science, as most scientific and philosophy authors wrote their works and treatises in it. As we are dealing with a castle dwelled by a pretty smart guy that has been around since the Renaissance period, Latin all around the place was something we should expect. Being the only guy in the team that had a direct contact with Latin, in high school to be more precise, well, it was kind of logical that any translation to be done would have my name on it. Translating stuff into Latin was kind of strange and fun task to do. At first I had a classic Latin dictionary, so if I had to translate any modern term, I would have to track its etymology down to the Latin equivalent, or look for a synonym or similar expression that had a direct translation. Then I had the luck to come across some dictionary for modern stuff online that addressed most of this stuff for a huge lot of terms, so it couldn't have come in a better time. Some days I would have Sebastian dropping a list of 9 or so entries to be translated, and before finding this dictionary, it was quite a lot of work. On a side note, we even had a choose your Latin poll on a couple entries, just to pick the one that sounded better for everyone. Results were pretty unanimous, by the way. For some final words on this, I must confess that, while I was pretty good at this in high school, that was like 15 years ago, so right now I'm not 100% sure translations are correct at all, but I took the time to make them at least plausible, so my apologies go in advance to any Latin guru up there playing the game, as I myself get on the verge of losing my temper when I see stuff like this obviously made up.
Hello, my name is Mark Nikander. I'm a 3D artist and level creator at Fictional Games. I started out as an helper during Penumbra Overture, and I was finally hired as a full-time artist in the later part of Penumbra Black Plague. The entrance hall was first shown in our first gameplay trailer, and while the layout hasn't changed much, the details certainly have. We build our levels from sets of pieces, in this case, the custom-based set. While the carefully planned set pieces made level building very easy, the levels became very similar and we had to make special pieces to the levels. Now, 1.5 years later, the special pieces make up about half of the pieces in the custom-based set, and we made changes to incorporate these objects into the earlier levels. An example of this can be seen if you compare the hole in the roof now with the one from the first trailer. The new roof was made in the middle of the project when we built level 9 Back Hall. A special version was made to give the roof hole in the entrance hall more depth and detail.
May 1839. The unflinching African sun has continued to plague our expedition, making it impossible to dig until dusk. How Professor Herbert managed to find the location in these vast plains of nothingness remains a mystery to me. When I asked him about the tomb again, he told me about the legend of Tin Hanan, the mother of us all. An interesting story in its own right, but I can't help feeling there's more. Later that evening, we uncovered a passage beneath the dunes leading to a sand-covered stone structure. The professor was confident it was the tomb we sought and ordered the others to clear the way late into the dark, cold night. Tomorrow, I shall lead the men into the ancient structure, hoping to reach the burial chamber. No matter what the professor is keeping from me, the dig should yield something interesting to take back to London and the British Museum.
To finish this little overview of our tools, I must mention the material editor, available both standalone and built into the other editors. The program itself is very simple to use. You have some material types defined by the engine, and you can throw in textures to be used for diffuse, normal maps, height maps, as well as some variables to control specific parameters for a material type. When I was writing it, I could just stare while the preview model rotated around itself and the parallax mapping effect was on when testing, just for fun. Another piece of the toolset is the model editor, used to create the entities you are interacting with while playing. Basically, we take a model and set up some parameters like physical bodies, joints, and user-defined variables. We can also attach sub-entities to them, like lights, particle systems. When an entity is finally set up, it is ready to be placed in a level using the level editor. Examples of entities here are doors, lamps, most furniture, critters. Another piece of the toolset is the model editor, used to create the entities you are interacting with while playing. Basically, We take a model and set up some parameters like physical bodies, joints, and user-defined variables. We can also attach sub-entities to them, like lights, particle systems. When an entity is finally set up, it is ready to be placed in a level using the level editor. Examples of entities here are doors, lamps, most furniture, critters.
"17th of May, 1839. My hands tremble as I write. I feel a need to document my tribulation, for I fear that my memory will fail me if I linger. Today, I took some men and ventured into the dark, ancient passage we uncovered. Our torches burned faintly in the murky air as we slowly made our way underground. The men were superstitious and fearful. They argued loudly, and I felt their strange language getting to me. I mustered my strength and yelled at them to continue down the slopes and broken steps. The crudely carved passage confused me. It looked much older than the 4th century structure we had expected. The twisting path emerged into a great antechamber. The walls were lined with statues unlike any I'd ever seen. Despite their unearthly quality, I felt a strange familiarity toward them, which haunts me still. At the far end of the chamber, a great slab of stone sealed off whatever lay ahead. I gave the order to raise it, and as I pushed through the narrow space, the heavy stone suddenly dropped, sealing me inside. I was trapped.
When I started writing, I had only outlined the framework for the story and the first few levels in the game design document, so I ended up finalizing a lot of material for the first levels, and then when those were done, we planned out the last 2/3 or so. This had a funny effect since I had to not only cater to the story, but to stay true to the stuff I've written for the first levels. Usually you can go back and forth while writing and change things, but if you have already recorded voices, you really shouldn't because of the costs. So the first text really shaped the rest of the material in an interesting way, and made them matter in a way I hadn't thought about. I really like how this thickens the story elements, as I am able to jump back into the material and keep using and reinforcing certain concepts. Agrippa is of course the most extreme effect of this method, which grew from a small reference to becoming one of the most important characters in the game.
May 1839. After pounding the unforgiving stone wall for what seemed like an eternity, I realized it was hopeless. I was trapped. I fell to the ground, gasping for air, trying to focus. That's when I saw a faint blue shimmer. My weakened body was heavy to carry, but I managed to push myself toward the enchanting light. It was waiting for me. Enclosed in dark nothingness, I felt myself drawn to the mystic light. I reached out, closing it in my hands. The faint glow escaped my fingers and began to spark brightly and spirit me away, unlocking alien memories of spiraling towers, endless deserts, and impossible geometry. The next thing I can remember is the grating sound of stone being lifted, the voices of the Arabs pulling me to safety, and grasped firmly in my hands was the broken pieces of a most peculiar relic.
Castle is old and hasn't been tended to for centuries. When the shadow arrives, it won't take long until things start falling apart.
We're just buying time anyway. Let's do what we can.
There isn't much to be done about the wars. We should reinforce weak structures. The ground will tremble and there's a risk everything will cave in on us, especially downstairs. Here, and there. Let's get the servants working on it. You have to be swift when you activate the first one. You hear that? If it stops, you'll have to start over.
Isn't all this a bit excessive?
You can never be too careful, Daniel.
did the Baron go?
Who cares? He left us enough wine to last us a lifetime. Or at least until tomorrow.
What's happening? Oh, feels like my chest is going to burst.
My God! Wilhelm, do something!
Except we're not getting out of here alive.
How can you say that? Alexander, you piece of shit! Let us out of here!
Hello, I'm Jens Nilsson, co-founder of Frictional Games. I work mainly with the sound, gameplay and event scripting in Amnesia. For my commentary in this game, I'll jump back and forth between the topics of sound, puzzle creation, and even talk about making this commentary. The basic structure of the earlier levels in the game has been built by me. I have not created the models or anything like that, but I have built the levels with the graphics from the artists using our level editor. This was the very reason for us to create the level editor, as it would allow for the whole team to work on levels, building them from scratch if so needed. For our previous Penumbra games, you could perhaps tweak a level a little bit, but making a whole level was the job for an artist and no one else. In the early days of the Amnesia project, the artists had their hands full with making graphics, and so I was the one building the levels. Looking at the levels now, a lot of things have changed and improved, but the base is still there. Showing that the idea to create the level editor was a sound one of the few things in fact with the Amnesia project that has not been scrapped, reworked or modified heavily.
A major design guideline for us was to give each level a unique theme, something that all puzzles, events and the general atmosphere was built upon. This makes each level a little piece of the story and theme at large, and also gives them focus so the player is not distracted with too much information. The theme in this level is the strange creatures that lurk in the castle. The player first spots them momentarily in archives, so now is the perfect place to build some fear. There is never any real threat in this level, but it's much darker than any before, and there's a constant pressure with boards creaking and the like. The flashbacks also give hints of where the strange creatures come from, making all events focused on the level's central theme.
The particle editor is also a fine part of the tool bundle, and it is what we use to create particle effects for maps and events. We use particles to do nice effects like the flames in torches and the smoke that comes out from them. All we have to do is add one or more particle emitters, set up some parameters like starting position and speed, on all sorts of fadings in size, color or speed. It's funny how you can simulate all kinds of effects with such simple elements. I very much recommend you to try it yourself.
early concepts, this was meant to be a sort of wine testing room and directly connected to the wine cellar. The reason for the whole wine testing thingy was that we planned on having more laboratories in later levels, so a lab here as well felt kind of strange. Then things changed and only one lab was left in the design, so we changed the name to laboratory instead. The whole wine testing facility that could make dangerous acid always felt kind of strange anyways.
dark in here.
Yes, and there's a good reason for it. But you can light the lamp now if you wish.
What's the reason? For the darkness, that is.
Stay close. Be careful not to stray.
What's the reason? Why is it so dark?
Pay attention, Daniel. It's important that you keep going straight and make sure not to stray.
This level was first called Distillery, and if you check the data file, it's still named as such. Now, for some reason I told Mikke, a writer, that it was called Refinery, and the voiceover was recorded with the wrong name. Since it's easier to change a name than a piece of voice data, we had to rename it. I'm glad I said Refinery though, and not King's Hall or Grandma's Vegetable Patch. That would not have been as fitting.
June. I found my journal this morning.
The end puzzle with the crank and pulley contraption was a tricky puzzle, not to create or on a technical level, but purely on a noticeable level. We added stuff to the puzzle perhaps 4 or 5 times because after each test session we kept having testers that did not see the piece of wood that you are to break to complete the puzzle. Originally you could only break it, so we added the option to pull it out as well. Then we added a faint light to draw the attention to it, and also tweaked the description of the crank. After that we added so that when you pull the crank there is a bit of dust falling from the piece of wood, and we also did a slight change in the angle of the piece of wood and changed the color and the texture, all to make it as notable as possible. So the question is, did you notice the piece of wood?
"25th of June. Yesterday. Smith."
Sonia, the composer from Amnesia The Dark Descent. You may have heard my music before if you played the Penumbra game series, and I did a couple of tracks for Penumbra Tech Demo too. So this is my 5th project with Frictional Games, and I'm happy to be a part of the team. The Guardian monster has its own musical theme, which you can hear in many situations in the game, even if the Guardian is not physically present. Actually, it's more like a noise sound than a certain melody, and I played it with my bassoon. The theme has many forms, and this one is almost a direct sound coming from the instrument. And this noise, which sounds like screaming, is a highly modified version of it.
At first, the creature in the water, affectionately called Lurky here at Frictional Games, did not have a sense of sound. Later on we wanted to add it though, so the player could lure it away by throwing stuff in the water. When I added this, something unexpected happened. Lurky started following me. When you jump on the crate, it hears the sound you make when you land and it goes there to investigate. This was very fun emergent behavior, and I think it made him even more menacing. I also want to add that Lurker was kind of inspired by my favorite movie as a child, Tremors. I guess this early obsession might also explain some creatures in our older games.
Hi, I am Tapio, and I made monster sounds and vision sounds for this game. Yeah, I just love this monster. I think it was pretty fun to make because there was underwater sounds as well as sounds from the above. I think I wanted it to sound like a very big monster, but still very fast. And I thought that voice itself needed to be high-pitched screaming because water is splashing around and messing other sounds. Actually, a great example is the attack sound where there is big water splash as it jumps from the water. At the same time, you can hear a short scream sound which is made from the cat sounds. I think it works great. I think other great sound is when it's just eating in the level. You can hear it eating meat and hear the bones crashing under the water. I made the eating sounds by walking in the water and breaking dry wooden sticks. The sound itself didn't need much processing or editing because it sounded almost like you hear now. Well, this is Water Monster, so I recorded lots of water sounds. For example, bubble sounds are made with a watering can, which is sunken in the water. And when it's chasing the player, its movement is made by a big rock, which I just threw in the lake. It feels like it's running after you or hitting its big hands on the water. I think there is lots of power in this monster.
This level is the high point of the lurker build-up, which sort of started in the entrance levels of the slide. It's supposed to be a sort of roller coaster. It's designed to be easy enough to be completed on the first try. Yep, it should be also many of the things in the level that seems like you barely make it are just scripted to be that way. But it's nothing to do with
In the original pitch, Herbert was a fairly important character, but it didn't really reflect in the games, so we tried a few different things to incorporate him, but it never really made any sense. Herbert was important to Daniel's background, but in the end he didn't have any impact on the story happening right now, that is, the conflict between Daniel and Alexander. So most of his things was cut during the last stage of production.
You have an ascending room. Will it take us to the inner sanctum?
It will definitely take care of the vertical part of our journey. So, you have ridden an elevator before?
Yes, the Colosseum at Regent's Park has one. It takes you to the gallery where you can view the panorama.
Good. This ride might be a little longer, and in the other direction.
When I first started working on the elevator, I had detailed concept art as base for my work. This is both a blessing and a curse. Concept art saves a lot of time for us artists. as we just have to copy what we see in the picture, but it also takes away some fun parts of our work, as we don't have to design anything ourselves. In this case, the concept art was very detailed and there wasn't much to change. However, I noticed that the roof part on the concept was dark and dull, so that's where I could add details of my own. I added the patterns to fill out the empty space. I wanted them to fit with the eastern feel of the elevator and took inspiration from Arabic windows. In the end, it's not a very big addition, but it adds to the overall impression of the elevator as something exotic that doesn't really fit in with the blue-grey stones of Brennenburg.
This is the second hub level of the game, and is supposed to give some contrast to the stressful lurker encounter. We think building up contrast like this is extremely important for the horror mood. Only by seeing a bright level can you appreciate the dark one, and so on. If you do not do this, player will get used to the stuff and the effect will lessen greatly.
Journal is gone. What would they want with my journal? Second of French.
Daniel?
What?
Still having nightmares, I see.
Yes. I can't shake them. They come every night.
We'll put a stop to them. You'll see.
Create props, we usually have concept pictures or reference images to look at when modeling the object, just to make sure it stays within the art style that we are going for. When creating a chair, a table, or a bookcase, just to name a few, we usually have to plan the measurements before we get them into the game, because having something in the game that isn't the right size can break the immersion. But sometimes you have to cheat that and test it out, because the camera perspective can really trick you. I have the perfect example of the camera tricking you sometimes. Take out the lantern in-game and look at the wall or an object in the same height as the lantern and try guessing how big the lantern will be next to that object. Then walk up as close as you can to that object and compare. If you got a good example out of this, you see that the hand and lantern is in fact very small, but it feels right when it's close to the camera. But we don't want to go on gut feeling on the measurements of every object. That could really get out of hand quickly, and a lot of things could feel out of place. So it's basically a matter of changing the scale if it feels weird. When modeling the prop, we try to make it as close as the reference images as we can, or if you've got a sketch, that is. It's often a quite simple process that usually doesn't take that much time, but it completely depends on what it is and if the sketch we have are detailed. Before giving the model a texture and working on that, we need to create a UV map for it. A UV map can best be described as an image with painted and edited details to it that is wrapped around the object. So the texture for a cardboard box, for example, would look like a box that you have unfolded onto the ground. After the UV map is created, we start to work on the texture. And here, we usually start with adding untouched materials like wood or metal, and these are from free photos found on the internet. We also paint in dirt in corners, highlights on the edges to enhance them. We can also bake and add an ambient occlusion map to the texture, which is basically a process where the computer calculates where the texture should be dark and where it should be light. We often generate a normal map based on certain details in the texture. A normal map uses light to add bumps or dents without using more polygons on the object. For specular maps, we use the red channel for the intensity level of the map and the green channel to determine the power of it. After all the textures are done, we export them to collada format and import them to our editors. There, we set material values, create bodies for collision, and stuff like that.
If you listen to the music tracks more carefully, you may find that characters have their own musical themes, which can usually be heard when you read papers during the game. These themes appears in many variations, so it's not always so easy to recognize them immediately. And in the end of the game, some of these themes will go quite insane. Oh, and that's Daniel's theme, which you can hear in the game's menu screen. Let me play it to you with piano.
Third of July. Mesa. Like this account.
In this room, everything is connected to destruction and home. This was Daniel's home as Alexander's guest, and the diary entries are about Daniel being home in London and things falling apart. These sort of connections are not something that we want the player to get, but rather it should end up in the subconscious and work toward building the mood. Also worth noting is this focus, as explained in the commentary of Wine Cellar, where I want the player's attention on a certain aspect. We hope this makes the story clearer. The idea is to slowly build it up, one part at a time, giving the player time to digest and think about it.
Daniel is a pretty complicated character to write for, as we didn't want the player to feel that they were losing control by having feelings imposed on them. After the amnesia kicks in, everything which is Daniel is essentially gone. The player is the new Daniel, and he should be able to act the way he pleases, and even reject his own background as he discovers it. That is why...
Let's see what you have to offer. What a mess. I should have sharpened the saw, but I can sense it. It's definitely there.
This map was one of the most fun to make because of the rooms have more objects than we usually add in a level. I think the first two rooms looks pretty good, just because of this. But we can't add this many objects in every room in the game, because that would, first of all, be very demanding on your PC's performance, and a lot of our players doesn't have gaming rigs. Secondly, it wouldn't make sense if every room or corridor was a storage. We also try very hard to vary the levels and rooms as much as we can do. This level was also the first time in the game the player had any contact with the outside. So for this part I had to make a couple of different wall pieces, a pine tree and a breakable version of the window. And I can talk a little bit more about the breakable window here. When creating breakable objects like this, we have to first of all break the model by splitting parts up and creating pieces. Like on this window, it has a lot of wood parts that are loose after it breaks. Those parts are remodeled into broken versions, and in the broken version of the window, they're actually hanging in the air at the same place they were when the window was whole. After modeling those and exporting the model into Collado format, which our engine handles, I use our in-house model editor, set each wood part up with a body for collision, and I also had to wait for it to behave realistically. I also had material type, in this case wood, and that is so that wood sound is played when the beats hit something. You can also set up more advanced stuff like how it will behave in water, how fast it can travel, and how fast the speed will decay, but also a lot of other settings as well. But when the broken version is done, I also set up a special entity of the original window where I set it to break at a certain force, and when that happens another entity will load and this one will disappear. And in this case we load the broken version of the window. We also set it up so a particle system with glass shards is going to be played as well as a break sound. And as soon as you break that window, and all that is happening, and since you probably threw something at the window, the force of that object will make the wood pieces fly, and not fall straight to the ground as they would otherwise. That is pretty much how we do it with most breakable entities. But of course, creating a particle system and sounds for this is needed too. And in this level, you can also see a lot of props that I made earlier, before we started making maps. This is objects like shelves, tables, chairs, paintings, etc. But of course I didn't make all the objects in this level.
The decision to have the player go outside in this map started out as a quick and dirty idea for some sort of puzzle. However, it turned out very nicely and to see the trees really gives a feeling of being in a castle and not just on some set. The first idea was not even to have the player break the window and just have it open directly instead. But when we added it, we felt it gave a really nice feel and reward for finishing the puzzle. In retrospect, we should have had more moments when the player ventures outside, and it gives this feel of being a part of a larger world. begin, there's a lot of elements here working together. Not only does the player enter the darkest level yet, they'll also come up against a dark part of Daniel's memories. We've tried to have all aspects of the level work towards this goal. Hopefully it creates an oppressive and disturbing feel.
At first, the hunted girl sequence was just another scare, but as the story took shape, it just became a great plot point, which was this is when Daniel snapped. He does all these weird and evil things, but he tells himself the ends justify the means. But when he finally kills the girl, he just can't make up excuses anymore, so he goes mad, and as a final attempt of saving himself, he drinks the amnesia potion. Of course, the player won't realize this as he encounters this first sequence, but it becomes clear when he finds the last diary pages explaining the situation, making it all come full circle.
4th of July. The 8th. Thank God, there it is. I guess it is a good place to hide it then.
Don't forget your bag, Daniel.
I won't, Herbert.
There is no shame in using a parasol in the desert. As it happens, it's imperative to your survival.
But it looks ridiculous.
The shade will hurt much less than dying, I assure you.
July, as I was.
This is another one of those contrast levels, this time calming the player down for what will happen once the elevator is finally running. The map is still dark though, giving a bit of foreboding for what is about to happen.
14th of July. Today, what am I to make of it?
When I first saw the concept art for this level, I was pretty happy because I think it looked very interesting, with all the pipes coming from random places and going throughout the level. But I was also a little bit worried because it looked so time-consuming to create all the pieces and placing them in the level. And in the end, I was right about that because it did take a lot of time to make everything fit together. But I also think it was worth it because it's a very interesting looking level. And we also use the same pipe system for other levels. As for all the pipes in this level, I modeled and textured them in Maya. I think there are 26 different pieces of pipes that I made. I had to import the wall pieces used in this level into Maya as well, and make a temporary little map to check the pipes were correct length and all. I also had to make sure all the pipes snap and align well at 0.25 meters in every axis, otherwise placing all the pipes in the level would be nearly impossible. As for creating the texture for the pipes, it was pretty easy because I went with a simple kind of rusty metal look. And when that was done, I started with the pipe work in the level. As you can see, there are a lot of pipes in this level. After this map was done, you could say I pretty much became the plumber of the team. And for some reason, I got most of the pipe-related levels scheduled to me.
actually constructed like one at a Swedish theme park. It's not the elevator that moves, but the wall. I assume movies use the same trick.
Come, this way.
What was that?
Forgive me, I should have warned you. One of my responsibilities as a Baron is that of a prison warden. This is where criminals are locked up.
Like a dungeon?
Very much so. Come, don't linger.
The second chapter introduces the dungeon-based set. It was designed to look older and more worn than the castle-based set. It's supposed to show the original pieces of the castle that hasn't been rebuilt over time like the newer areas. The original pieces for the set were a bit blocky due to the tiling, but as the special pieces were added you could start to build more varied levels. In the final game, we're using the dungeon-based set for prisons, shrines and sewers.
Previously in the game, it has been all about events in the past, but with these prison levels we wanted to bring it to the present, and many events experienced are happening here and now. An example of this is a prisoner being dragged off at the start of the level. Here also starts the most encounter-intense part of the game, and we were a bit unsure on how much enemies we could add. We added what we thought was enough, but after some testing and feedback, we decided to add even more. The amount of encounters experienced depends a bit on how you play the level, but hopefully you should feel constantly oppressed. Since this was the last level that this enemy has a greater part in, we did not fear overusing it either, so I think the amount of enemies here is pretty nice.
Where is she? Where did she go?
No! I won't tell! I'll never tell you!
You're just making things worse. Look, this is no place for a young girl all by herself. She could be hurt, or worse. There's no telling what horrors await down there.
apologize. You must go. Find Gabriel, the Outrider, and tell him to alert the King's men.
No, you come too.
Please, we don't have time to make the hole any wider.
But...
Someone is coming. Hurry! I'll cover the hole with the bed. Everything will be fine. I promise.
2nd of August, they are...
Soon it will be ready. Let there be enough time. He escaped? Where is he now?